Hello there, I'm Karim Fazakri and you're watching All 24 News, World News program live from the capital Algiers. Next up are the headlines. The Polisario Front says it still holds the keys to a fair solution, slamming efforts to turn the Western Sahara issue into a backroom deal. It also accuses Morocco and the EU of cutting secret agreements. Also in our news, Algeria has joined the UN Cybercrime Convention. 13 new oil finds were made this year, and a nationwide push is underway to plant 1 million trees in just one day. And in Gaza, Zionist airstrikes left several wounded. Since the truce began, 557 bodies have been recovered, while the siege and Rafah crossing closure drag on. And later on in Ukraine, one killed in a new Russian strike on Kiev. Moscow warns of flooding after Ukrainian shelling and talks up a possible diplomatic fix with Washington and Kiev. All this and more shortly. Welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, Nana Labat Rashid, advisor to the Sahrawi presidency for media and the Arab world, says the Polisario Front holds the real keys to power, the will of the Sahrawi people. Speaking to All 24 News Channel, she stressed that the front draws its strength from popular legitimacy, something the Moroccan occupation and its backers choose to ignore. She added that any solution imposed from outside will simply be rejected by the Sahrawis.
Abstentions.
The Polisario holds the keys to the power that those supporting the Moroccan occupation choose to ignore, and even Morocco itself overlooks, which is the power of the Sahrawi people, their right, their will and their ability to impose the solutions that best serve them. It is the people who must be consulted through a referendum to determine their own destiny. No country, whatever its influence, can impose an acceptable solution upon them.
On the same occasion, the Sahrawi official also denounced attempts to turn the decolonization issue into a political deal imposed by force on the Sahrawi people.
With a stroke of a pen, the issue is being shifted from its legal and legitimate framework, where it has been managed for over 50 years under international agreements, to an attempt to impose a solution without consent. This is impossible. Even if such a decision were to be adopted in this manner, it could not be implemented without the participation of the Sahrawi people and the Polisario Front. The Polisario, the sole and legitimate representative of the Sahrawi people, has already declared that it will not take part in any negotiations based on principles that undermine their rights. So, to whom would autonomy be granted, and upon whom would Morocco's so-called sovereignty be imposed? It's the real stakeholders, the Sahrawi people and their representative. The Polisario refused to engage in a process that distorts the cause and departs from its legal foundation.
Commenting on efforts to bypass the EU court's ruling against trade deals covering Western Sahara, Nana Labat Rashid accused France of backing the Mahsen regime to profit from Sahrawi resources.
Countries that also claim this law, such as France, claim to protect freedom and human rights. They also present themselves as democratic nations and defenders of liberty and democracy. Yet they legitimize the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara and contribute to the plundering of its resources, thereby prolonging the conflict and the suffering of the Sahrawi people. Therefore, the truth is that confronting or fighting the Sahrawi people is not difficult for one or two reasons, but for many. It is because they are not only fighting Morocco. Ultimately, Morocco is a factional state, but it serves as a tool for forces that use it as a gateway for plunder and a means to undermine the freedoms of peoples.
The Polisario Front says deals between Morocco and the EU were made secretly, bypassing official European channels. The Front's political official, Amrabe El-Mami, warned that these suspicious agreements only continue Morocco's policy of plundering the Sahrawi people's natural resources. Moving on to another story now. Algeria has signed the UN Convention Against Cybercrime during a ceremony in Hanoi, joining 64 countries and regional bodies. The Foreign Ministry said Secretary General Lounes Magramen signed on behalf of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. It's the first global treaty aimed at tackling cybercrime. Algeria played a key role in drafting the convention, chairing the committee and leading talks since 2021, which ended up with its adoption at the UN General Assembly in December 2024. The UN Convention Against Cybercrime is the first global agreement to fight cybercrime. It's the result of 5 years of international negotiations led by Algeria, which chaired the UN committee drafting the text since May 2021, before the convention was officially adopted at the 79th UN General Assembly last December. The report by Yassine Riktina.
A major step forward in the global fight against cybercrime, as more than 60 countries signed a landmark United Nations treaty in Hanoi, Vietnam. The convention, 5 years in the making and led by Algeria, marks the first-year global agreement designed to tackle the growing threat of cybercrime. The new treaty lays out a framework for international cooperation, allowing countries to share electronic evidence in serious criminal cases and to jointly combat a wide range of cyber offenses, including the online exploitation of children. It also establishes a 24/7 global cooperation network to coordinate cross-border efforts while promoting technical assistance and capacity building, especially for developing nations.
UN Cybercrime Convention is a powerful, legally binding instrument to strengthen our collective defenses against cybercrime. It is a promise that fundamental human rights, such as privacy, dignity, and safety, must be protected both offline and online. It is a testament to the continued power of multilateralism to deliver solutions. And it is a vow that no country, no matter their level of development, will be left defenseless against cybercrime.
Algeria played a central role throughout the process, chairing the UN committee that drafted and negotiated the treaty since 2021, a process that culminated in its adoption by the UN General Assembly late last year.
And maximize the potential of this landmark agreement that has built a cyberspace that respects everyone's dignity and human rights, and that has ensured that the digital age delivers peace, security, and prosperity for all.
The accord has been hailed as a milestone for global security, strengthening cooperation among nations and underscoring Algeria's leadership in shaping a safer, more resilient digital future.
Still with Algeria-related news, Algeria's crude oil exports rose by 9,000 barrels per day in the first 9 months of the year, up 2.2% from last year. According to the energy platform TACA, exports averaged 418,000 barrels a day between January and September, mainly to European markets. Spain was the top buyer, with imports up by 22,000 barrels per day, while France saw a drop of 10,000 barrels. Exports to the UK and Portugal also increased, but shipments to France and Italy declined. And in another energy-related news, Algeria's state energy giant Sonatrach made 13 new oil discoveries in the first 8 months of the year. Energy Minister Mohamed Arqab told Parliament that these finds will help boost production and renew the country's reserves. He added that Algeria invested over $5 billion in the hydrocarbons and mining sectors between January and August, with revenues from oil and gas exports topping $31 billion by the end of September. In Morocco, the Generation Z movement hit the streets again on Saturday, holding fresh protests nearly a month after the movement began. The demonstrations come as unions in the health and education sectors plan nationwide strikes this week, protesting poor working conditions and stalled reforms. The report by Salman Asebna.
In Morocco, public frustration with the Mahsen regime is rising, fueled by peaceful protests led largely by Generation Z. Young Moroccans have taken to the streets, demanding transparency, justice, and real political reform. But instead of dialogue, the government has responded with repression and arbitrary arrests, deepening public outrage and highlighting its failure to curb corruption and conflicts of interest. Generation Z simply demanding its most legitimate rights, which concern all citizens, and that is their right to protest. Everyone in this country, especially the free press, is seeking the right to a dignified life, and for every Moroccan to enjoy their rights to health, education, work, and housing. If we want to put an end to this social pressure and its protests, the government must respond to these demands and consider changing its policies, which generally do not place citizens at the heart of its priorities. Unions across multiple sectors are now threatening to step up their actions, announcing nationwide sit-ins to protest worsening working conditions and the lack of meaningful reforms. The Health Workers Union was among the first to sound the alarm, joining nursing students who had already rallied against exclusion and neglect in their training institutions.
We know that the health sector in Morocco is neglected, especially when it comes to nurses. We have graduates, but they are unemployed, which is in complete contradiction with the shortage we have in the healthcare sector.
Today, we are protesting against the lack of budgetary positions. We note that there are many graduates, but the number of positions is limited, while the healthcare sector suffers from a shortage of nursing staff. We therefore have two demands: to provide a sufficient number of positions for graduates and to pay for internships, through which we fill the staff shortage without being paid. Observers say the news is tightening around the Mahsen, now facing growing pressure on several fronts: political, social, and economic. It's a reflection of the deep frustration gripping Morocco, where dialogue channels have closed, marginalization has spread, and daily living conditions continue to deteriorate.
And in other topical news, medical sources in Gaza say 6 people were wounded by occupation fire across the strip since dawn, including a child shot in Rafah. Others were hurt in shelling on Al-Fakari, Bani Suhaila, and Deir al-Bala. The Health Ministry says rescue teams have recovered 557 bodies since the ceasefire was announced, 93 of them after it took effect. It added that 19 new bodies were brought to hospitals in the past 2 days, bringing the total death toll since October 7, 2023 to over 68,500, with more than 170,000 wounded. The Israeli occupation is keeping the Rafah crossing with Egypt closed, cutting off vital humanitarian aid to Gaza and worsening shortages across the Strip. Hamas, meanwhile, says reopening all crossings, including Rafah, is part of the ceasefire deal, but Israel continues to block both aid deliveries and the evacuation of the sick and wounded. The UN says more than 7,000 tons of unexploded ordnance remain scattered across the Strip. It's urging international experts to step in, warning that cleanup could take up to 30 years without help. Ottawa, meanwhile, reports that thousands of tons of rubble still blanket the entire Strip, forcing many displaced families to search for shelter among the ruins. And in occupied Palestine, Israeli occupation forces launched a large-scale arrest campaign at dawn Saturday across Gaza and the occupied West Bank, detaining 3 fishermen off Gaza's coast and several Palestinians in Al-Khalil, Salfit, Tulkarem, Jenin, and Ramallah. Meanwhile, settler violence is escalating. Masked settlers attack El Mughayir village, injuring 4 Palestinians and torching cars. The UN says settler attacks rose 13% this year, leaving West Bank farmers struggling to harvest olives as their trees are uprooted and lands are being destroyed.
I have lived in this house for about 50 years. Due to the increasing attacks by settlers on my home, I was forced to install barbed wire like this to protect my house and my children. It shields them as much as possible from settler attacks. I used to have 370 olive trees. Now only 20 remain. I used to produce 50 containers of olive oil, but today I produce only 1 or 1.5. That's all that remains of my land after the destruction caused by the Jews.
In another story, Ottawa says it's ready to resume trade talks with Washington when conditions allow. This comes after President Donald Trump paused negotiations with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, noting that trade policy with the U.S. isn't entirely in Canada's control.
Backed up. You got new slides. All right, good morning. We stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions, because it will be for the benefit of workers in the United States, workers in Canada, and families in both of our countries. Now, what we can control, absolutely, is how we build here at home, and that's the focus of Budget 2025, generational investment here in Canada. And what we can also control, or at least heavily influence, is developing new partnerships and opportunities, including with the economic giants of Asia, which is the focus of this trip.
Moving on to another story, U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday he does not plan to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin until he thinks a deal is in place to secure peace between Russia and Ukraine. Responding to a journalist who asked him what would Russia have to do for him, Trump, to reschedule his meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I'm going to have to know that we're going to make a deal. I'm not going to be wasting my time. I've always had a great relationship with Vladimir Putin, but this has been very disappointing. I thought this would have gone long before peace in the Middle East.
Still with the Russia-Ukraine war, Kiev's military administration says 1 person was killed and 10 others injured after Russian missile and drone strikes hit the city Friday night. The Ukrainian Air Force said it downed 4 of 9 missiles and 50 of 62 drones launched in separate attacks across the country. Meanwhile, the governor of Russia's Belgorod region accused Ukraine of shelling a local dam on Saturday, warning it could collapse and cause flooding. He urged residents in nearby areas to evacuate and seek shelter. Kiev has not yet commented on the claims. Russia's defense ministry says its air defenses shut down 281 Ukrainian drones in the past 24 hours. In a statement on Saturday, it added that a Neptune missile launcher, 2 guided bombs, and drone workshops in Ukraine were also destroyed. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to meet President Xi Jinping after his Asian tour. The report is signed by Sahara's Virginia. Let's follow.
The US-China trade tensions are back in focus as both sides send mixed signals of pressure and negotiation. President Donald Trump launched a key Asian tour, set to culminate in talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Speaking aboard Air Force One, Trump said he hoped for a very good meeting that could prevent new tariffs due on November 1st.
We have a lot of things to discuss, including our farmers. We have a lot of things to discuss. Various trade deals that have been made in the past, and some broken, some not broken, but we've got many things. I think it's going to turn out to be a very good meeting. Have to make concessions. I guess we would too. We're at 157% tariff for them. I don't think that's sustainable for them, and they want to get that down, and we want certain things from them. I think it'll be very good.
But optimism soon turned to renewed friction. Washington opened a fresh probe into Beijing's compliance with the trade deal signed during Trump's first term, a move U.S. officials called a warning and a legal tool to counter unfair trade practices.
The new investigation reflects the Trump administration's determination to hold China to its commitment and protect American producers and innovators. The goal is a more balanced, reciprocal trade relationship that benefits the American people.
Beijing swiftly rejected the U.S. accusations, denouncing the new investigations as groundless and provocative. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington said the COVID-19 pandemic hindered the country's ability to fully meet its purchase commitments under the 2020 trade deal.
The original agreement, signed in January 2020, aimed to correct trade imbalances through an additional $200 billion in U.S. goods purchases over 2 years. These targets were not fully achieved as the pandemic disrupted global trade and weakened demand.
From promises of a great deal to renewed probes and denials, the US-China trade war continues to evolve, a reminder that between the world's two largest economies, cooperation and confrontation often go hand in hand.
Time to catch up on other news stories making headlines in the News in Brief with Sofian Kenturi.
Clashes erupted in Rome as police used water cannons to disperse pro-Palestinian protesters, demanding Zionist envoy's expulsion and denouncing the Gaza assault. The Sudanese army said Saturday it repelled RSF drone attacks on Al-Fashir in northern Darfur and a separate assault on an air base in White Nile State. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said Friday the Security Council is in urgent need of reform, warning that its legitimacy has become fragile. Speaking on the UN's founding anniversary, he urged expanding the Council's membership and addressing its internal imbalance, noting that some members have repeatedly acted against the UN Charter. Polling stations closed Saturday in Côte d'Ivoire after voters cast their ballots in the presidential election led by incumbent Alassane Ouattara, who is seeking a fourth term. Most observers expect the 83-year-old to win in the first round, with about 1,000 civil society observers and 251 monitors from ECOWAS and the African Union deployed nationwide.
And finally in our news, Algeria has launched its biggest ever tree planting campaign, aiming to plant 1 million trees in a single day under the golden slogan, Green, God willing. The drive kicked off in Tizi Ouzou, focusing on restoring areas hit by the 2021 wildfires, and through strong participation from citizens and civil society groups. The report is signed by Karim Mustafawi.
Because tree planting is an investment in the future, Algeria has launched a nationwide reforestation campaign stretching across all 58 provinces with the ambitious goal of planting 1 million trees under the slogan Green by God's will. From children and families to volunteers of all ages, hundreds of Algerians turned out to take part, celebrating nature and reaffirming their shared commitment to protecting the earth.
I brought my children here so they could take part in this tree planting campaign. I hope this initiative will continue over time.
We planted trees, we watered them, and I am really happy to have taken part in this campaign.
The aim of this reforestation operation is to make our country a green territory. It is an act of civic responsibility.
Joining citizens on the ground, government officials and local leaders also rolled up their sleeves, planting the first seedlings of the 2025-2026 national campaign. Each region's effort have been carefully planned to match the country's climate conditions.
When you see the large number of participants who spontaneously joined the mobilization, even though access to this region was not easy and there was a lot of traffic, it is something that makes you happy and indicates that the Algerian people are aware of the importance of environmental sustainability.
The government currently has a strategy to rebuild forest cover over an area of 4.7 million hectares by 2030.
As desertification threatens many nations, Algeria's Green Drive stands as a powerful example of collective action, a reminder that safeguarding the environment is not just a duty, but a legacy for generations to come.
And that's the end of our news for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Karim Fazakri. Thank you for watching and do take care.